Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers. Brought to you by the good people at CACI, the Center for American Culture and Ideas. Ant, what's new and exciting in your world this week?
Well, I know you used to like to be regaled with my stories of my beloved Southwest.
Oh, here we go.
Since I've moved to D.C., I don't fly Southwest anymore. I'm now building up status on United.
That's like going from Greyhound to JetBlue.
Hey, Southwest got me where I was going, and United so far does the same thing, so I'm not complaining. But I have a story here about a United pilot, Scott Wardle, who was flying from Houston to Phoenix. And about 45 minutes into the flight, he receives a call from the crew that there's a passenger sickness and it required them to make an emergency landing in Albuquerque. So they make the emergency landing and these things take a bit of time. And it turns out that his crew timed out while they were on the ground.
That's always great.
Yeah, he can't take off again. He needs a new crew, so they're waiting for the new crew to show up. And, of course, he's got 150 passengers who you can imagine are quite irate at this point. What does he do? He pulls out his own wallet and orders 30 pizzas.
Not bad.
For the passengers. And they sit there having a pizza party. Yeah.
I'm guessing they were very happy with the customer service they received.
They're very happy with the customer service.
I'm also certain he is not getting reimbursed for that.
Well, I'm sure that United's getting a lot of traction from this. But look, this is the thing. People complain about, businesses, they're only out for a profit. There are plenty of examples of businesses reaching into their pockets and doing the right thing, as you see here. Of course, this is Scott Wardle, not United. But people point to that and say cynically, well, the only reason the company is doing this magnanimous thing is so that it can get some press and, again, make more profit in the future. And I think people forget something important, that companies are simply collections of people. In any company you have, just like you have in any random group of people, good and caring and thoughtful people and other people who aren't so. And when things go wrong, look, they're people just being people. And here we have Scott Wardle, who must be in person a genuinely nice and considerate guy. And what does he do? He gets into a situation where his passengers have a problem. He does his best to fix it. Not because he's looking to make a profit for United, not because he's looking to pad his own pocket, but because it was just the right thing to do. And this isn't a function of companies, it's a function of people.
Well, seeing as how you're talking about people, I think I should also talk about collections of people, because if corporations are just collections of people, surely government is just a collection of people, correct?
Yes, I agree. There's a big difference that we can get to in a bit, but yeah, I agree.
Let's see how far we can take this, because our good friend Rich Mendoza sent something along a couple of days ago, hoping it would be the foolishness of the week. And it could have been, but for my need of symmetry, which we'll come to in a moment. And by the way, thanks for the T-shirt, Rich. He sent me a lovely, almost obscene T-shirt that I wear from time to time. He sent us a story about Governor Kathy Hochul from the great state of New York, who said that they're going to save their people 40% on a charge that they were going to charge $15 for, up from a charge of $0. But now they're only going to charge $9, so they've saved them 40%.
So the claim is, you should like us, we're saving you 40%.
It's pure government logic, right? You're right now being charged $0. We were going to charge you $15, and this is to enter the island of Manhattan, which is something that's worth exactly $0. You ought not do it in the first place. But if you must, it's part of a surge pricing package. They're going to charge $15 to get you in. Now they're only going to charge you $9. But to me, that sounds like an increase of $9, not a decrease of $6.
Yeah, well, these are politicians. They will, with all seriousness, call a budget cut an increase that's less than what they actually wanted. That's a budget cut.
And we find here that being a collection of people is not exactly necessarily a help. But this, of course, Ant, brings us to the foolishness of the week. And if that wasn't the foolishness, I don't know what could be, unless there's some religious nonsense going on again. And you might remember that the Catholic Church some time ago, in one of our various foolishnesses of the week, had an AI chatbot that took it upon itself to start taking confessions.
I love that story.
You remember that. It became so self-aware that it decided of its own volition to just start taking confessions. Not to be outdone, you might recall not too long ago, the Episcopalians were at it, doing God knows what Episcopalians do. And the Catholics apparently saw this as the throwing down of a gauntlet because they're back.
Oh no, what are they doing now?
The Catholics are back. A church in Lucerne, Switzerland, a place that I know for my love of watches, has decided to offer an AI-powered Jesus hologram to take confession. Where the first hologram decided to take confession all by itself, this one is designed to, but it ups the ante by giving you some Jesus. You walk into a confessional, turn on the screen, Jesus comes on the screen, and you confess to him.
No, this is a joke. This can't be right.
No, I wish it were, but no. I mean, I'm a hilarious guy, but I'm not this funny.
Nah, we have to look into this more clearly because I know.
And I have already vetted this story because I thought for sure when I saw this, oh, that's some bull right there. We got to dig into this a minute. And there are stories on it in the major press all over the world.
So there are rules for how the Catholic Church dispenses sacraments, and this violates a whole slew of them. I cannot believe it's possible.
And yet it is, and we've got pictures and everything. 2/3 of the people who went in to talk to AI Jesus came out saying they had had a spiritual experience. The other third came out saying it was a bunch of nonsense and they didn't want to do it again, saying that the advice was quite generic and meant almost nothing to them, as you could well imagine.
Well, put the link in the show notes because I want to dig into it.
I will absolutely. I just, don't these people feel silly when they walk in and have to hold a button down to get the Jesus on the screen, and then they got to hold another button down when they want to talk?
Yeah, I could tell you this is a joke. Someone's pulling one over on you. This cannot be right.
Well, I've got the link from the Daily Mail here, and it was literally in every other major newspaper I looked at. So, joke's on somebody, but probably not me.
This is a special two-part episode of Words and Numbers. Last January, I moved to the Washington, D.C. area, switching out my academic career for a career in banking. I put out a call to listeners in the D.C. area who might want to get together for coffee. Before I knew it, that afternoon coffee had taken on a life of its own. 40 listeners ended up descending on D.C. for the weekend, several flying in from as far away as Texas, Florida, Arizona, and Ohio. Andra Mount, longtime listener and organizer of all things Words and Numbers, put together a day trip into D.C. In the evening, everyone gathered for food, drink, and conversation. Clark Neily, who has appeared on numerous episodes, hosted the event at his house. Phil Magness and Mikhail Rasner, each of whom have also appeared on multiple episodes, joined us also. What you're about to hear is the live recording we made that evening, just 4 days after the 2024 presidential election. James and I give special thanks to Clark for hosting the event, to Andra for organizing and coordinating, and to the many listeners who put forth the effort and expense to join us. Week after week, we send out our thoughts, hoping that someone out there is listening. The email we receive, the generous donations from our Patreon sponsors, and the outpouring of support so many of you gave just by showing up for this event give us hope that our efforts do yield good fruit. Part 2, this two-part episode, contains questions from the people in the room. I apologize in advance for the sound quality. We had 3 microphones, one of which I had configured incorrectly. So while you'll get good quality on James, Phil's, and Mikhail's voices, Clark and I sound like we're yelling into tuna cans. But hang in there, the group we assembled this week delivered a top-notch episode. If you have a question,
come up and speak it into the mic. Feel free to say your name if you want to.
This is Dr. Anwar Dunbar, my first time on the Words and Numbers podcast. Thank you. So, Mikhail, I guess this is a softball for you. So it sounds like both sides are using tariffs. Everybody's using tariffs.
Everybody's using tariffs. I think one party is going to ultimately run on more tariffs to bring jobs back. I think the other party is going to run on tariffs to re-diversify where our products come from, to be more inclusive, per se. I'm spitballing ideas, but at the end of the day, I think we're getting to a point potentially where we're going to have to answer for some of this debt, and we're going to get to a point where politicians are saying, well, no, we're doing it. See some of these tariffs that we're putting on some of these countries to diminish it? I think ultimately it's just more of a media play.
Hi, my name is Jessica Bowen. I'm a public school teacher in Massachusetts and a big fan of Words and Numbers. My question is, in the sort of post-election aftermath, there's a lot of ebullience and a lot of absolute despondence. So my question is, are you generally feeling optimistic or pessimistic? And specifically, can you be something that you are optimistic you think might happen and something that you are really pessimistic and worried will happen?
Well, see, on the optimism front, democracy didn't die on Tuesday night as both parties were claiming it was going to. Our constitutional government seems to still be persisting. I actually predicted this. It wasn't a hard prediction, but nonetheless, given some of the rhetoric around that, I do view that as a cause. Things are going to be all right in some sense. The pessimism, yeah, I was rooting for divided government of some sort. It didn't matter which side which chamber or the presidency. I wanted divided government. I don't think we're going to get that. Unfortunately, the tariff issue is a very pronounced part of the Trump platform and presidency. I mean, he's a tariff guy in the abstract. I don't think he understands what tariffs do. Because he says they can both fund the government and keep goods out. These are mutually contradictory assertions. Where I do worry, J.D. Vance actually does believe those things. Is a deep, true believer in protectionism supposedly makes America great. And I worry that sort of rhetoric will be more emboldened than it was in the last Trump presidency.
And I'll point out, Phil, that when Trump became president in 2016, he said that he would, in 2 terms, pay off the debt. Now, that's impossible in 2 terms, and anybody with a rudimentary understanding of mathematics can know that. But not only did he not do half of that, as one might have expected, he increased the debt by the largest amount of any president in history. And I fully expect he will do that again, and I fully expect whoever replaces him will do it some more.
Now, in his partial defense,
here we go.
In his partial defense, along comes COVID. In all of the stuff that's involved with the lockdown and the stimulus spending and all of that, which his defenders will point to and say, you can't blame him because this. However, I point out that this happens every 10 years. Every 10 years, it's something. So it's COVID in 2020. In roughly 2010, it was the housing crisis and the financial meltdown. In 2000, plus or minus, it was 9/11. In 1990, plus or minus, it was the S&L bailout. In 1980, plus or minus, it was Star Wars. Every single 10 years. 1970, it was the oil crisis, right? Maybe 1960, we got a respite. I don't know. While any given president can say, well, I had to deficit spend because this thing came along, you shouldn't be surprised. It's every 10 years something like this comes along.
And you should also be willing, if you're in that chair, to say, I know times are tough and I know this is hard and you're going to have to suck it up a little. Now, you and I, Antony, wrote about this at the time. The thing that we got behind Trump a little bit when he said that he was going to start giving out money was, well, if the government deprives you of your living, then maybe it's acceptable that the government makes you whole in some way. But let's go back to that first stop, shall we? Right. The government shouldn't deprive you of your living.
This is going to be a little bit lurid, but if you're in a dentist chair for a root canal and the dentist comes in drunk and is clearly messing up the job, it's entirely rational to fire him and perhaps even punish him. But it's not entirely clear that the correct answer is to hire a spider monkey to finish the job. Right? And I personally think that's not a completely ridiculous take on what we've just done, right? We had some completely incompetent people who were making a series of totally indefensible bad decisions. And then we said, well, let's just replace them with somebody who staged an insurrection, which I think he did. reason people can differ, right? But I don't think it's a big stretch to say that Trump doesn't really seem to understand the basic genius of American democracy, right?
And he was exactly why it was designed the way it was.
I think so, right? That's, they put a lot of guardrails in place, and many of those guardrails, they might not have foreseen this particular, form of your destructor, but they had some sense of what it could be, right?
Yeah.
An interesting version.
But see, I want to go back to my answer to your question when I said the root problem is the voter. You could argue that, well, Trump does or doesn't understand tariffs and Biden before him, what have you. And I think all of that is irrelevant. It doesn't matter whether the president does or does not understand. What matters is whether the voters do. Because if the guy that they elect starts behaving against what they understand to be decision-making, they're going to vote the guy out.
Define understand.
So what?
Define understand. I don't think American voters understand much.
No, I
They
don't
vote on vibes.
I don't think they do, and I don't think it's because they're stupid. I think it's because there's a self-interest problem. They've got other concerns than following up as to whether or not trade is a good or a bad thing. What I do know is I work in this factory and we sell stuff to China, and therefore exporting is good. I understand that. Now, do I have the intelligence to go deeper? Sure, I do. But I've got other things. I got kids to raise. I got a mortgage to pay. I got the car to be fixed. It's not on my top 10 list to think about that thing.
So I'm going to propose a possibly consistent and possibly inconsistent hypothetical. What if what really is the American voter is being asked to decide who is lying to you more plausibly, right? Because Trump's lying to you by saying, I'm going to resolve the Ukraine situation tomorrow, and I'm going to get inflation under control, and I'm going to get all the people who don't belong in this country out without shattering any families or destroying any American values, right? And the Democrats are saying, we're going to restore complete equality and opportunity, right? We're not going to, no sacrifices have to be made, and we can spend it to get those things done without harming anybody's financial future. They're all lying. I think what it comes down to is the American voter is being tasked with the assignment of figuring out who's lying the most. Phil has something to say.
Think on the repercussions of those lies. Look at the exit polls. What did everyone say that they responded to? 75% of the electorate cited the inflation of 2021 through 22 as either a moderate or a severe harm on their own well-being. Something like 40% of the electorate said the economy is the number one issue. Now, could they explain the mechanisms of the Federal Reserve and how inflation works? Probably not. That's like 5% of the electorate max understands that. But they do.
You misspelled 0.5.
0.5, yeah. But they do understand, the effect of their pocketbook. They understand what was going on at the grocery store. They know that they've lost purchasing power over the past 4 years and really concentrate in a 2-year period.
This is why Bill Clinton became president.
It absolutely is.
It's the economy, stupid.
It absolutely is.
And why Kamala Harris isn't.
Yeah. And I want to say, if you want to blame anyone for the election of Trump, it's modern monetary theory. Call up Stephanie Kelton. Trump should be calling Stephanie Kelton and say, thank you for electing me. Because the Biden administration basically embraced that and did not have a mechanism to respond to the biggest inflationary crisis in 40 years. People don't know how to explain why that happened, but they do know that it affected them at the pocketbook. And, that turns out it's the economy, stupid again.
We have another question?
I'm Guy Higgins, and I'm just going to start off with Daniel Kahneman wrote a book, the Nobel laureate wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And thinking fast was basically, if it sounds good, it must be right, and get on with life. And then I'm going to morph over to the Washington Post, used to conduct, and maybe still does, a contest every year where you could take any English word and add, subtract, or change one letter and redefine it. And my favorite is the Doppler effect, which is the tendency of any idea to sound good if it comes at you really fast. And I would like to understand your thoughts about those two observations.
I'll start with this because I would say the majority of what I actually do is sales.
No, you're starting this because the youngest by 20 years.
I don't think I am.
We're about the same age.
I was gonna. Well, yeah. All right. I don't know about that. We'll figure that out later. So I do agree with that effect. There is an aspect of ideas are really good if they come at you fast. At the same time, I think that is only the case when you're decision making, and maybe something sounds good right now, but I think there's a sleep on it effect that does exist. We don't get the election cycle all in one day. If we did, I think Trump would have won 15 terms in a row. But I think that because
Depends on which day.
yeah, that's fair.
He has his ups and downs.
This is a good point. The more charismatic would obviously win consistently, other than shock value. But I think because the general public does take time to actually make the decision, I say that and then I kind of question myself. So at least at some point, we definitely took time to make that decision.
I think this is actually kind of interesting because I think the Doppler effect is fascinating and probably exactly correct, right? That the idea that if you spit something at people fast enough, they're going to be predisposed to say, yeah. But take that one step further. Why is that? Well, it's because people love hearing what they love to hear. And I think we've got a very solid bulwark of human beings, maybe on the order of 40-odd%, who will just believe everything you say if you say a few things that they know to be true.
James, question. Why did that not work to Kamala's advantage when she didn't have to go through a contested primary, right? It seems like that got thrown at us real fast.
Right.
Like, you like her or not like her, right?
Worse than that, people forget that Kamala Harris tried to become the nominee and failed miserably. She got no support whatsoever.
Recall when she did come out, or when she was picked as the candidate, she had a huge bump.
It was because everybody's relieved that it wasn't.
It's like, she's not Biden.
That's right. She didn't get a bump. The Democrats got a bump. And then it disappeared when she started saying things. And if you notice, she decided not to say things in a lot of venues. Where were her national interviews? Did she go to Joe Rogan? And Joe Rogan, bless his miserable heart, said, no, you're coming here if you want to be on my show. I'm not coming to you. And what did people say? Joe Rogan's a racist and a misogynist.
It went from the walking dead to the walking mute.
Yeah. And, she said just enough that all the people who are going to vote for a Democrat anyway decided she was good enough. And all the people who were going to vote for a Republican anyway said, Trump's our boy. And there was 10, 12% left. And they decided the election as they always do.
Hey, since we've all had a shot, can we go around the table and do something?
Yeah.
Sure.
Best Kamala Harris cackle impression.
No, not doing
No?
it. I've already done.
James.
I've done Ross Perot already.
You're
I'm
just
not doing
generating
this.
stuff on
Okay, all right. I feel like I want to throw this out to the audience because that's one of the best things.
We should wrap this up because all these good people have been standing.
People have been drinking and standing too much. They need to drink more and sit,
Yeah. Phil, we've heard the least from you.
which is odd.
Why don't you say something to take us home here?
I have a theory. It's because you don't really need to hear from Phil because you already know in your heart what he's going to say.
Yeah.
Yes,
Lay it on us, Phil.
yes.
We already know what you're going to
Yeah,
say.
but we know that about James. He says it anyway.
Phil's going to tell it like it is, and when he says how it is, you're going to be like, yeah, I guess.
We all want Phil to be wrong, but we know in our hearts he's not.
Well, democracy survived, so I will reiterate that. But yes, we have a task ahead of us for the next 4 years, the next 8 years, the next 100 years. Our political system yields very flawed politicians. And, the exuberance of the moment is certainly around Trump. Had it gone the other way, just a few points the other way, it would have been around Harris. I tend not to trust either of them. I tend not to trust either candidate in most elections. I haven't voted for a candidate in most elections that had any chance of winning for that exact reason. The robustness of the institution goes back to what we were talking about on constitutional levels. We have a constitution that is actually pretty well designed to absorb some pretty terrible politicians. And you think about that through history, we've had some really bad presidents. We've had some really bad Supreme Courts, really bad Congresses.
And what does Madison tell us? Enlightened statesmen will not always be at the helm. Right? Straight out of Federalist 51. And that's right.
Probably more so than not.
The very few times it happens that you see an enlightened statesman, it's almost as if the Aristotelian king by nature shows up and we all just acquiesce. Most of the time, we look at these people and say, what a bunch of fools. And that's exactly who the system was designed to withstand.
Never forget that they're fools, too.
So with that, thank you, gentlemen. This has been a great time, and thank you all for showing up.
And that's all the time we've got this week on Words and Numbers. Until next time, be sure to follow us on Twitter. Handles are in the show notes. Join Words and Numbers Backstage, the Facebook group where the conversation continues, and
send us email, wordsandnumberspodcast@gmail.com.
Until next week, try to be nice to one person who doesn't deserve it. Just one. And who knows, it may turn into a trend. Give it a shot. You might feel good about yourself.
You could say you tried.
You tried, that's right. Till next week, can't take it easy.
See you next week, James.